The greatest betrayal does not always come from enemies. Sometimes it wears the surname you gave with love. Sometimes the people you die for are the ones who write your obituary while you're still breathing. The smell of antiseptic stung Margaret's nose before her eyes even opened. Her chest burned with every shallow breath, and her body felt like it had been crushed, as if life had been pulled from her and forced back in. Machines beeped in slow rhythm beside her. The air was sterile, cold, but she was alive. She blinked. Her vision blurry, but shapes began to form a monitor, a drip, the pale blue curtain drawn halfway around her hospital bed. Her fingers twitched, dry and aching. She turned her head slightly. There was no one there, no son holding her hand, no comforting voice of her daughter-in-law, no familiar faces, just a nurse, startled to see her awake. "Mrs. Davis, oh my God, you're awake." Margaret tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped. The nurse rushed out, calling for a doctor, muttering something about her chart, the DNR. And they said she wouldn't make it. Confusion swirled inside Margaret's foggy mind. DNR, as in, do not resuscitate. She had never signed such a thing. A doctor arrived, glancing between her and a tablet. He asked her name, the date, if she knew where she was. She answered weakly, but clearly. She was alive, very much aware, and terrified. Later that day, as she drifted in and out of restless sleep, a younger nurse whispered too loudly near the door. "I thought her son had already signed off. They were clearing her room this morning. Heard her house was already listed." Margaret froze. Every nerve in her body seemed to scream. Her heart monitor picked up speed. Her house, her room. What was happening? She spent the next 2 days recovering in silence, pretending to sleep when staff came in, listening to every word exchanged. There were no visitors. Not her son, Aaron, not his wife, Stephanie, not even her granddaughter, Lily. No flowers. Number. Calls. By day 3. The horror began to piece itself together. Aaron had power of attorney. She had signed it over years ago after her second stroke, trusting him, her only son. But somehow, while she lay unconscious, they'd signed a DNR on her behalf. They expected her to die. No worse they had planned for her death. And then, moved on, she overheard that her belongings had been picked up yesterday. Her house was indeed on the market. There had even been a memorial post made online. Her friend Irene had commented on it, which is how the nurse had recognized her name. A tribute. Rest in peace, Margaret Davis. They thought she was gone, and no one had even checked to see if her hand was still warm. If this story is already making your heart race, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone. Who needs to hear that strength has no age limit? This story isn't over. Margaret has just begun by the time she was discharged. Margaret refused to speak to the staff about contacting family. She didn't want a car, didn't want a greeting. Instead, she used the discharge phone to call the only person she could still trust, her sister, Rita. She said, her voice still hoarse, "I need you to come get me now. Don't tell anyone. And bring the old phone, the one we used for Mom when she had that thing with her neighbor." Rita's voice on the other end was quiet, steady. "Where are you?" "Memorial General, East Wing, room 412. But Rita, please don't act surprised when you see me, 'cause apparently I'm supposed to be dead." 2 hours later, Rita arrived. Margaret saw her sister walk down the hallway like a storm cloud in a blazer, elegant, fierce, unshakable. Rita Davis was a semi-retired attorney with a sharp tongue and an even sharper memory as she walked into the room and saw Margaret sitting up, eyes sunken but alive. Her face did not falter. She nodded once and said, "You look better than the obituary made it sound." That was the moment Margaret allowed herself to cry. Not because she was weak, but because someone had finally seen her, alive back at Rita's cottage, miles away. From the city and tucked into the woods of northern Michigan, Margaret stared at the fire in the stone hearth. She wrapped the thick wool blanket tighter around her shoulders. still feeling the chill of betrayal more than any hospital air conditioning ever could. "They sold my house," she whispered. "My books, my teacups, the cedar chest from Mom, ... It's all gone." Rita poured 2 mugs of tea, placing one in Margaret's trembling hands. "They didn't just sell your things," Rita said calmly. "They tried to erase you, but they made one mistake." Margaret looked up. What? They left the storyteller alive. That night, Margaret made 2 promises to herself. First, that she would never ever be powerless again. And second, that no one would control her ending but her. The days at Rita's cottage passed like soft waves, quiet but not still. Margaret's body healed slowly, but her mind? Her mind moved like a tide turning beneath moonlight. She said little, but her thoughts were loud. She read lot newspapers, legal pamphlets, blogs. She sat in Rita's sunroom, wrapped in flannel, researching financial abuse, elder neglect, DNR policies. There were forums, anonymous ones, where people told stories like hers. And for the first time, she realized she wasn't alone. "I'm going to write," she told Rita one morning, her voice sharper now, lips no longer pale. "About what?" "Everything. But not as Margaret Davis. I need distance. I need armor." Rita raised an eyebrow over her coffee. "A pseudonym." "Elva, it was Mom's middle name. Feels like a ghost walking back with a pen." With Rita's help, Margaret created an anonymous blog. Clean, minimal design. Black and white. No photos, just words. The title, Restless Spirit. Her first post was short. "They wrote a tribute post before checking my pulse. Sold my house while I was breathing through a tube. Called it grief, but it was greed. It didn't die. And now I'm writing from the other side of betrayal." She clicked publish with a trembling finger. By the next morning, 312 people had read it. She kept writing each day. Another piece, stories of subtle neglect, of being talked over in doctor appointments, of feeling erased. In her own home, she wrote about how power of attorney can be twisted, how silence becomes a weapon, and how the elderly often fade from their own families long before death claims them. Post by post, her voice sharpened. And her audience grew 3,400. Then, a repost by a nurses' union page. "Who is this woman?" Someone commented, "She's saying everything we see but can't say." Rita watched from the side, proud but cautious. "You're gaining traction. You want to stay anonymous? You'll need to be smarter." Margaret nodded. "I'm not done hiding, but I'm done being quiet." Meanwhile, she started building a paper trail. Every shred of evidence, signed DNR forms she never consented to, emails between Aaron and realtors, digital copies of her will they had attempted to execute while she was sedated. Rita called in favors. Old contacts in probate law, medical ethics, financial compliance. Quiet conversations happened behind closed doors. "You have a case," Rita said, flipping through. A folder one night. A big one. Fraud. Medical malpractice. Financial exploitation. Margaret looked at the documents like they were fossils from someone else's life. "I just wanted a family," she whispered. "Now I want the truth." But amid the strength, the cracks remained at night. Margaret cried alone. Not out of weakness, but mourning. Mourning the son she thought she raised. Mourning birthdays remembered too late, phone calls rushed, affection that had grown mechanical. She remembered a time when Aaron clung to her legs at preschool drop-off. When he cried at 17 because he didn't get into his first choice. College, she held his head in her lap back then. When had the warmth gone cold? Rita found her one evening staring at a photo album. "You don't have to stop loving him to hold him accountable," she said. Margaret didn't look up. "I think the part that loved him died in that hospital bed. I just didn't know it until..." Now, 1 week later, a journalist reached out. A woman named Celia Monroe, editor of a mid-size investigative site. Emailed the Restless Spirit blog. Subject line: "Your words are setting fire to silence. Can we talk?" Margaret hesitated. She forwarded the email to Rita. Do I dare? Rita called her immediately. Only if you're ready to be seen. Margaret stared at the screen. After a long pause, she replied. They met in a quiet cafe, 2 towns over. Margaret wore sunglasses and a scarf, her hair pulled back. She looked less like a victim and more like a ghost haunting the land of the living. Celia leaned in. You don't have to tell me your real name. I just want to get this. Right? The world needs to hear it. Margaret considered. Then she said softly, if they could bury me publicly, then I can rise the same way. She handed over a folder copies of everything. Documents, screenshots, receipts. If I die for real this time, I want this published. Celia blinked. That's not going to happen, but this is going to explode. A week later, the article dropped. The woman who was buried alive by her family and fought back. It didn't use Margaret's real name, but it used her words. Fire, her pain. Within 24 hours, the post hit 200,000 views. Advocacy groups reshared it. Nurses commented. Adult children who felt ashamed of their silence spoke out. And something strange happened. Erin emailed her. For the first time in months, the subject line read, We need to talk. Please. Margaret stared. At it. Rita was in the kitchen. You going to open it? She shook her head. No. Let him wonder if I'm alive or just a story now. Notoriety has a strange echo. It doesn't knock, it seeps. It's one day you're invisible. The next, your headline dust settling across screens in cities you've never seen. Margaret felt it first at the grocery store. She went for tea and bread. Head low, scarf tight. At checkout, a young woman stared too long, then whispered, I read your blog. Thank you. Margaret didn't answer. She nodded once and left. But the world had shifted. Back home, Rita was pacing with her phone. It's happening. I just got off the line with AARP. They want to interview Elva on Elder Fraud Awareness Week. Margaret exhaled slowly. Then Elva will speak. But fame was never the goal. Justice was. With Rita's guidance, Margaret filed formal complaints with the State Medical Board and Elder Protection Services. She sent notarized letters contesting the power of attorney transfers and demanded an audit of her financial records. Then she did the unthinkable. She revoked her will. The updated document, drafted in Rita's office with cold precision, removed Erin entirely. Trina, too. Instead, a portion of her assets was redirected toward a fund supporting elderly victims of family exploitation. She also named her niece, Maya, as her medical proxy. Maya cried when she found out. I don't deserve this, she said on a trembling. Cole, you showed up when I had nothing left, Margaret replied. That's what family is. But the battle was far from over. Erin didn't stay quiet. Soon a response appeared on Facebook. A carefully worded post from his professional page. This past year has been incredibly painful for our family. We've tried to respect privacy, but recent claims circulating online are deeply misleading. We acted in what we believed were the best interests of our mother during a medical crisis. We love her. We always will. It ended with a photo of him holding a framed picture of Margaret taken years ago. Before the betrayal, the comments split like a knife. Some offered sympathy. Others saw through the polish. She wrote from her hospital bed, Erin, you erased her and hoped no one would notice. Margaret saw the post. Her hand clenched around the mouse. He still thinks this is PR, she murmured. Rita stood behind. He thinks this is salvageable, but you'll cave to embarrassment. Margaret clicked Create Post on Restless Spirit. Her next entry read, I didn't write this to ruin my son. I wrote it because silence nearly killed me. Not bitter. I am not angry. I am awake. And in waking, I found a strange thing. Truth doesn't need approval. A local news station picked up the story next. They blurred her face but kept her words. The segment aired on a Wednesday evening. Margaret watched it from Rita's couch, blanket wrapped around her legs, tea in hand. Her voice, soft, steady, narrated. The closing lines, they buried me too soon. But I rose with breath and memory intact, and this time, I write the ending. When the screen faded, Rita turned to her. You're becoming more than a survivor, Mags. You're becoming a mirror. Margaret shook her head gently. I'm becoming a warning. But beneath the rising power, doubt lingered. One night, Margaret dreamed of Aaron as a boy, again curled up on her lap, cheeks wet with tears, clutching a scraped knee. She woke up breathless, guilt bleeding through her ribs. She found Rita in the kitchen at 3 a.m., sipping warm milk. I wanted to believe he'd protect me one day, Margaret whispered. And he did, legally, until it served him not to. You raised a man the world rewarded for ambition, Rita said. But you're not responsible for what he did with that reward. Margaret nodded. Slowly, then, she whispered, I just needed to hear it. A few weeks later, her blog crossed 1 million views. With it came letters, hundreds of them. Emails from strangers, survivors, nurses, adult children. Grandmothers, thank you for speaking what I couldn't. You gave me permission to remember who I was before they made me feel invisible. My mother died in silence. But your words made me grieve her properly. She printed a few of them, taped them by her writing desk. They weren't fan mail. They were witnesses. And then came the offer. A major publisher. A real book deal. They wanted a memoir. Restless Spirit in print. Full distribution. A platform for her to speak at events. Tour libraries. Appear on panels. Rita, read the contract. They're legit. I'll protect your identity until you're ready, if you ever are. Margaret took a breath. Then maybe the world is ready to meet Margaret again. Rita smiled. Are you? She looked out the window at the mountains. I think I'm still meeting her too. There was a strange stillness in walking into a room where people knew who you were, but only through your pain. Margaret felt that stillness sharpen around her like a halo as she entered the community center auditorium. She wore her navy blue sweater, her wedding ring on a chain, and no makeup. Her silver hair was pinned up, her eyes calm. Dozens of strangers, mostly women, many her age, turned to look. The first ever Restless Spirit reading was about to begin. She stepped to the podium. The microphone hummed. Her fingers trembled. Then she spoke. I'm not here to inspire, she began. I'm here to remember out loud. The silence in the room deepened. Margaret told them about the ICU, the beep of machines, the touch of a nurse who whispered, You're not gone, sweetheart. She told them about the lawyer's letter that arrived 2 days after she came to declaring her legally incapacitated. She told them about the house she would never walk through again, the heirloom necklace Trina sold, the emails unanswered, the funeral tribute she didn't attend because she was too busy surviving it. And I'm telling you now, she said, voice rising, because you need to know that this happens. Quietly. Legally. 2 women who have already given the world everything. She ended with a simple phrase. I didn't die. But the part of me that stayed silent did. The applause was long, raw. A woman in the second row wept openly. Afterward, people lined up. Hugs, confessions. One woman slipped Margaret a folded note. They treated my mother like she was in the way. Thank you for proving we aren't disposable. Word spread. Requests flooded in. Podcasts, webinars, a documentary team reached out. She declined TV spots but agreed to record at readings, 1 in Chicago, 1 in Baltimore. With each appearance, Margaret felt her shoulders straighten. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was reclamation. The blog had already become a movement. Others now shared their stories under the Restless Spirit banner. A retired nurse from Utah, a widow from Florida, a veteran's daughter from Ohio. They weren't statistics anymore. They had names, faces, grief, and Margaret Sutt, 67, had become their voice. Still, she moved carefully. She hadn't seen Aaron in over a year, but his name came up often. He'd been suspended from his job after internal ethics concerns. Trina's clinic had lost several patients. Investigations were underway. One day, a certified letter arrived for Margaret. She recognized his handwriting, inside a typed letter. No apology, no warmth, just explanations. He blamed stress, said the doctors told him she wouldn't recover. Claimed Trina handled the documents. Mentioned they were under extreme pressure and acted out of fear, not malice. At the bottom, "We never meant to hurt you." Margaret stared at the page. She didn't cry, she turned it over. Blank. Then she folded it once, slowly, and placed it in the fireplace. In contrast, Maya came to visit. She arrived on a rainy Saturday, suitcase in hand, nervous and hopeful. They made tea together. No music. No forced cheer. Just quiet. You were the only one who didn't look away. Margaret said as they sat on the couch. "I didn't know how to help," Maya replied. "But I couldn't pretend it was okay." "That was help," Margaret said. They talked late into the night about the inheritance, now redirected, about boundaries, about trust that couldn't be rebuilt but could be re-earned. "I don't want anything from you," Maya whispered. "Just to know I didn't lose you too." "You didn't," Margaret said. "But you may never get back the version of me that trusted too easily." Maya nodded. "I wouldn't ask her to come back. I like this one." The next blog entry was titled, "Aftermath is a Country Without Maps." In it, Margaret wrote, "Forgiveness is not the absence of memory. It's the presence of boundary. I do not wish my son harm, but I no longer wish him access." The piece went viral again. The comments section lit up. And soon, an idea began to form. A foundation built from the blog's reach. Rita helped draft the mission statement. Restless Spirit Foundation, empowering elder women to reclaim narrative, agency, and justice. Workshops. Legal resources, emergency funds for women, coerced or stripped of control. It would launch the following spring. Margaret's name was listed only once, under founder. One afternoon, while updating the foundation website, she paused. She looked out the window at the distant tree line. Then, almost absently, she whispered, "I survived a living obituary, but now I write my own biography." And this time, no one would erase her. The stage was modest, just a black backdrop, a row of folding chairs, and a podium under soft lights. But the crowd was anything but small. Over 300 people had filled the Seattle auditorium. Survivors, advocates, daughters, grandmothers, journalists. And at the center of the program brochure, a grayscale photo of Margaret Langford. Below it, in bold, "Keynote, from a race to unforgettable, the reckoning of Margaret Langford." She sat backstage, calmly flipping through her notes. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't pretending. She was ready when they called her name. The crowd stood. Not because she asked, because she had earned it. Margaret walked up slowly, her silver hair in a loose bun, her posture regal. She wore a deep green shawl over a simple black dress. No symbols, no dramatics, just presence. She adjusted the microphone. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she said softly. "Not just on this stage, anywhere." A beat. "They said goodbye before I did." Gasps rippled across the room. She let them settle. "My story isn't unique. That's what makes it horrifying." She told the room about the power of silence and the rage that grows underneath it, about hospitals that listen to signatures more than 2 signs of life, about families who plan goodbyes before asking questions. And about the quiet revolution that happens when you write your own resurrection. She ended with one final line. "You don't need permission to begin again, just breath and fire." Standing ovation lasted almost 5 minutes. After the event, a woman approached her backstage, late 70s, wrinkled hands, tears barely held back. "I'm Judy," she said. "My son told people I had dementia, took my name off the deed." I wasn't even confused, I was grieving. A husband had just died. Margaret touched her hand. You don't have to convince me you were lucid, she said gently. I read. Your blog, Judy said. I found my voice again. I left him. It was a long pause. I didn't think I could start over at this age, she whispered. You're not starting over, Margaret said. You're continuing as yourself. Later. That week, the Restless Spirit Foundation officially launched online. Margaret refused to make herself the center. She insisted it be community, but she agreed to do one recorded video for the website, a black and white monologue. In it, she stared directly into the camera. My name is Margaret Langford. I am a mother, a widow, a survivor. I was legally erased. But I refused to disappear. They sold my things. I rebuilt meaning. They wrote tributes. I wrote truth. They closed the chapter. I started a movement. If you're watching this, you are not alone and you are not finished. One day, while organizing old documents, Margaret found the original DNR order Trina had submitted. She stared at it, the clean black ink. The unchecked boxes, her own name, underlined like a warning. It was the only thing she hadn't burned. Instead, placed it in a shadow box frame with one phrase engraved at the bottom. They tried to bury me, but I was a seed, Maya began, volunteering at the foundation once a week. She brought coffee, organized intake forms, even suggested a digital archive of survivor testimonies. She's different now, Rita noted one evening. Still young, but softer. Hard truths. We'll do that to a person, Margaret said. I'm proud of you, Rita added. Margaret smiled. I'm not sure I've earned that yet. You didn't need to, Rita said. You just took it back. The final chapter of Margaret's blog went live in early spring. It was titled Permission Granted. If you've been waiting for someone to believe you, I do. If you've been told it's too late, it isn't. If you've been erased, begin again in all caps. This is not a comeback. This is your continuation. It trended for days. A photo of Margaret standing beneath a cherry blossom tree. Eyes closed, wind in her hair circulated online with the caption, "This is what survival looks like when it stops apologizing." But there was one more surprise. An invitation from the New York Times for an interview. A full Sunday profile. She almost declined, but Rita said, you survived what they did. Now survive being seen. So she accepted. The article was titled, Declared Dead. She built a life too loud to bury. In the cover photo, Margaret stood alone on a dock at sunrise. No dramatic lighting, just her shadow in the water, stretching forward. She kept the physical copy in a drawer, not for herself, but for the women who came after. Sometimes healing is quiet. It doesn't arrive with fireworks nor applause. It comes in the form of making your own tea in the morning and realizing you want to taste it. That was Margaret Langford now. She didn't rush. She didn't chase. Closure. She simply lived with a kind of unshakable dignity that didn't require an audience. It was a late June afternoon when she returned to the cemetery for the first time. She had avoided it not out of fear, but because it symbolized a script she never agreed to. But today was different. She wore a white linen blouse, sunglasses, and brought no flowers. Just a folded piece of paper in her hand. The plaque read, "In loving memory of Margaret Ann Langford, 1957 to 2023. She smirked. Well, not quite, she muttered. She sat beside it and unfolded the note. Her own words. A letter to the version of herself they had tried to kill, not just physically, but emotionally. You were never gone. Just silenced. But I've heard you now, and I promise your name won't fade. She tucked the letter into the edge of the memorial and stood up. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. She had already returned to herself. Later that summer, hosted a backyard dinner at Rita's house. Lanterns, laughter, wine, grass beneath bare feet. Jazz playing from a Bluetooth speaker. Around the table sat women who had found her blog, each one with their own version of resurrection. A woman in her 70s who left a toxic marriage. a retired teacher who reported her daughter's financial abuse, a nurse who testified against a care facility for over-medicating elderly patients. They didn't swap sob stories. They toasted each other's beginnings. "This isn't a survivor group," Margaret said, raising her glass. "It's a continuation committee." The media attention slowly faded. But Margaret's influence didn't. She became a quiet force. In state policy discussions about elder rights, she spoke in private sessions, not for fame, but to protect futures. Chloe visited often. They'd sit on the porch, drinking lemonade, talking about everything but the past. "I never saw them for who they really were," Chloe said one night. "You saw what you wanted to see." Margaret replied, "That's not a crime. It's hope." "Do you ever miss them?" she asked. Margaret paused. "I miss who I thought they were, but I don't miss what they did." Silence. Then Margaret added, "And I don't carry it anymore." The blog stayed up. But Margaret stopped posting her last entry was short. Only 3 lines. "I am not dead. I am not bitter. I am becoming." It became a quote printed on t-shirts, mugs, even protest banners. But she didn't need to post anymore. She had spoken now. Others could in her living room above the fireplace. She placed a photo of herself at age 30 on a hiking trail, wild. Curls, muddy boots, arms wide open. It was the version of herself no one ever asked about. The one before wife, before mother, before betrayal. The original Margaret. Under the photo, she added a brass plate with 4 simple words. "Still here, still rising." And when people asked, "How did you survive all that?" she'd answer, "I stopped asking why me and started asking what now." This story moved you or reminded you that it's never too late to reclaim your voice. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe for more real stories of strength, reinvention, and truth. Your support helps us reach those who still feel invisible.